The story continues in Star Labs, where Professor Hamilton points a kryptonite at Superman, who is dressed up in some kind of mechanical suit. Surprisingly, the kryptonite does not affect Superman. He even plays with it like a baseball, and instead of puking like a patient on chemo, he feels fine. According to the professor, the suit is made with titanium lead alloy and leaded polycarbonate, elements known for withstanding the effects of kryptonite. Meanwhile, in the same building, one of the workers is having a hard time controlling a fork life. His name is Rudy, and his constant failure to control the machine frustrates his partner, Mr. LeBeau. Apparently, they're there to steal a couple of containers, but they are interrupted by two guards. One of them recognizes Rudy and asks if he's been assigned to machine work. Rudy lies and calls himself a forklift operator, but he gets busted by his ID card, still labeling him a janitor. The other cop immediately takes an interest in Rudy's accomplice and points out it's a little too early to be shopping for Christmas. Mr. LeBeau takes matters into his own hands.
Maybe I can clear all this up.
And points a gun at the guards, forcing them to retreat. However, before he pulls the trigger, Rudy jumps on him, and the guards find cover immediately. Being the stronger fella, Mr. LeBeau fights off Rudy and shoots at the guards. Unfortunately, the shooting causes an explosion, allowing Rudy and Mr. LeBeau to drive off with the containers. Meanwhile, the explosion alerts Superman, who flies to the scene. He sees Rudy and his accomplice breaking through the gate with their vehicle, but he also hears the guards screaming for help. Like the goody two-shoes he is, he decides to help the guards and let the criminals escape. However, instead of quenching the fire with his freeze breath, he decides to aura farm by walking through the fire instead. Using his super strength, he smashes the wall and uses the embedded water pipe to quench the fire. Afterward, the guard tells him Rudy is the culprit behind the theft, and the containers he stole contain a dangerous fluid. Hearing this surprises Superman, but he notices some of the fluid in the scene. He puts his hand through it and stares at it intensely, trying to figure out what it might be. On the other hand, Rudy is having a hard time keeping himself from being thrown off the trunk of the car due to Mr. LeBeau speeding like a Formula One driver. He screams at him to slow down, but Mr. LeBeau doesn't give two donuts about his safety. Unluckily for Rudy, the fluid in the container spills over and covers him completely. He starts to scream for help, but the sight of him scares Mr. LeBeau, who maneuvers the car and drops him off it.
Adios, freak.
He then drives off, leaving Rudy to his fate in the bushes. Later that evening, a wayward mouse ends up in Rudy's path, and as soon as he grabs it, something strange happens. A surge of current starts pulsing through Rudy. As if he's absorbing the rat's energy, his eyes start to glow, and he now looks nothing like the Rudy we know. After a while, he bumps into a patrol officer who almost hits him with her vehicle. She attempts to help him, but after seeing something that resembles a weapon in his hands, she gets defensive and pulls out her gun. In a flash, Rudy knocks off her weapon and absorbs her energy. He then gives wrong information to the dispatcher using the officer's voice. He laughs hysterically and drives off, leaving the officer helpless on the bridge. The next day, the officer is rescued by the police, and Clark, together with Jimmy, is there to cover the story. The detective in charge tells them the officer mentioned being attacked by a purple monster. Like the kid he is, Jimmy assumes the monster is Barney, but he gets scolded by the detective. Just then, Clark notices the purple fluid on the bridge and tries to touch it. But the detective advises against it and proceeds to tell him about Rudy's partner, Mr. LeBeau. Speaking of the devil, Mr. LeBeau arrives at his home, but he is ambushed by a figure lurking in the shadows. He looks back and sees Rudy, a little different from the last time he saw him. Rudy attacks him and absorbs his energy. Anytime he does this, he gets both his victim's strength and knowledge. However, Superman arrives at the scene and tries to use talk no jutsu to calm Rudy down. At first, Rudy pretends to listen to him and even gets him to promise not to harm him, but suddenly he grabs grabs Superman and absorbs his energy. Superman manages to fight him off, but he becomes tired. Rudy zaps him once more and eventually throws him into a metal pole. Superman picks up the ball and attacks Rudy with it, but Rudy turns out to be too strong for him. He thwacks Superman into the sea and flies away, claiming to be the new Superman in town. Not long after, news breaks out of Rudy wreaking havoc in town and taking anything he wants. He is now called Parasite, and according to Professor Hamilton, he was exposed to a large quantity of fluid designed to catalyze energy absorption in human cells. Looking at the news, Clark gets a call from the hospital, and judging from his reaction, it appears to be good news. He takes Jimmy along and they head over there. Meanwhile, Rudy tries to steal yet again, but realizes he can't break through the walls because he has used up all the juice he got from Superman. Soon, he hears sirens going off and decides to dip. At the hospital, Clark and Jimmy realize that the officer Rudy attacked now feels fine, and due to this, they conclude that Parasite's drain is temporary. Clark also tests out this theory by bending and straightening a nearby pole. However, that day at his house, he gets jumped by Rudy, who drains his powers yet again. Rudy reveals that he knows his real identity, and he continues to drain Clark's powers till he passes out. Some moments later, Clark wakes up, but he has been chained down by Rudy. Rudy approaches him and mocks him. He then mimics Clark's voice, which quenches the idea that people might come looking for him. He then proceeds to feed off his energy yet again. For over a week, Parasite continues to destroy Metropolis while keeping Superman locked up. Clark's disappearance has also raised concern at his place of work, but Jimmy, being a smart kid, points out that Parasite has been flying south from Star Labs. He suggests going over to check the lab, but the chief dismisses his idea. However, he steals a reporter's tag and heads over by himself. On getting there, he pretends to be a reporter researching Rudy, and even though he looks too young to be a reporter, the guard lets him have his way. While he snoops around, Clark hears his voice and tries to make a bit of noise to alert him. Jimmy hears this and follows the sound, which leads him to an underground tunnel. He soon gets to Clark and tries to help him. He also tells him they're in Star Labs, but Clark tells him to get help. Unfortunately, Rudy returns for some recharge, and Jimmy quickly hides. However, Rudy sees him with his X-ray vision and attacks him. Luckily, Clark breaks free from his chains and knocks Rudy out. He then takes Jimmy to safety and also tells everyone to leave the lab. Not long after, Rudy follows him, but he uses a laser machine to cut the walls, which falls on Rudy, stalling him for a bit. However, it doesn't hold him for long as he follows Clark into the weapons lab. Inside, Clark sneaks up on him in his mechanical suit and attacks him from behind. However, since he's not at full strength yet, Rudy overpowers him. The two continue to wrestle like a WWE SmackDown show, and Rudy pins Clark to the wall. He tries to absorb Clark's power, but his hand goes against the wall, touching the kryptonite instead. The kryptonite drains his strength, and he passes out. Afterward, Rudy ends up in prison, and according to Professor Hamilton, he has lost his memories after his fight with Superman. However, unknown to them, he absorbs the energy of a nearby rogue and smiles like things are going according to plan. In Metropolis Prison, a guard brings food for John Corbin, a hardened criminal. However, he gets a heart attack after eating the meal and collapses. After a while, he gets a diagnosis from Dr. Vale, who tells him he has an incurable disease. Afraid he might never see girls again, he crashes out on the doctor and grabs him by the collar. Just then, the doctor tells him there might be a way to save him. Not far from the prison, Clark cycles peacefully by himself, but he is scolded for being a slowpoke by an old lady who can't mind her business. Suddenly, a bunch of nukes start hitting the prison and destroy the walls. Seizing the opportunity, prisoners dash out and run toward their freedom. More nukes continue to hit, but Clark flies in with this Superman outfit and redirects one of them. He also recovers 2 prisoners trying to escape on a boat. He then borrows a fisherman's net and captures the rest of the prisoners in the water. In the end, he blocks the broken entrance with a large rock and calls it a day. Unknown to him, Corbin has escaped by diving underwater, and he meets Dr. Vale, who takes him to his sponsor, Lex Luthor. At LexCorp, Luthor arranges a surgical operation for Corbin, which he claims is a reward for not implicating him in the Luthor suit incident that landed him in prison. The operation involves fusing his body with Metallo, an indestructible alloy, which will be powered by Eryptonite. Luthor makes Corbin promise to go after Superman to repay him for saving his life, and Corbin, who has nothing else to lose, agrees. The next day, news of Corbin's escape gets to Clark and Lois. The latter gives Clark a paper showing that Corbin is infected with a rare disease native to an island in South America. Clark is surprised by this, but since Corbin used to be a mercenary, he might have contracted the disease during his travels. Meanwhile, Corbin has undergone surgery and is seeing his new body in the mirror. Just then, Luthor decides to test his new body and takes him to a machine. Corbin destroys the machine with his strength and impresses Luthor. For another test, Luthor sends missiles toward him, but after the explosion, Corbin remains unharmed. Strangely, Corbin complains that he can't feel anything, not even pain. However, Luthor assures him it can be fixed, but for now, he must take his revenge on Superman. Later that day, Corbin goes to a subway and interacts with a flower lady. However, he can't smell her flowers, and the frustration makes him push her away. He proceeds to jump onto the train rack, and despite protests from people, he refuses to get off. A train approaches at a fast pace and collides with him. Corbin destroys the train and starts throwing the parts around. Soon, news of the destruction reaches Clark, and he hurries over before Corbin can do more damage. He rams Corbin into the wall, and their fight destroys million-dollar buildings, causing another headache for the government. However, Superman gets lowballed by Corb, who exposes the kryptonite in his chest, causing Superman to kneel before Zod. Seeing that Superman is weak, Corbin knocks him around like his plaything and even throws him into a bridge. Just then, Lois arrives in her car and tries to save Superman, but she is blindsided by Corbin, who grabs her and sticks his tongue down her throat. Sadly for him, he doesn't get a sensation in his sausage and gets slapped instead. Angry at not being able to feel a kiss, he wonders what Luthor's scientists had done to him. Meanwhile, Superman rams him off the bridge with Lois's car and later apologizes to her for wrecking her vehicle. Back at LexCorp, Corbin crashes in on one of the doctors and asks to be fixed. Sadly, he finds out that the doctor can't do anything about it. The fact that he will feel no pleasure from gooning causes him to crash out on the doctor and throws him onto the sofa. He then rips part of his fake skin off and starts calling himself Metallo. Meanwhile, at Metropolis Prison, Clark and Lois investigate Dr. Vale and find out that he retired after hitting the lottery. They snoop around his office, searching for a link to Corbin. Just then, Lois finds a box, and after seeing through it with X-ray vision, Clark sees a vial that contains a strange fluid. Lois also sees a parking ticket that points to LexCorp, their next course of investigation. The next day, Luthor rizzes up a baddie on his yacht, but his moment gets ruined when Corbin appears from the shadows. Corbin complains to Luthor about not being able to taste, smell, or feel pleasure. He angrily throws the baddie into the sea and grabs Luthor by the collar. Luthor tries to reason with him, but Corbin already knows about his lie. However, Luthor convinces him that he has people working on helping him, and hurting him won't solve the issue. Corbin finally calms down and goes into the yacht. A while later, Luthor and Corbin are on the way to a lab where Corbin's skin can be fixed, and Lex reminds him that he still needs to take care of Superman. Just then, Superman lands on the yacht and asks Luthor for Corbin's whereabouts. Luthor pretends not to know, giving Corbin the space to land a kung fu kick on Superman. He unveils the kryptonite once again, and Superman gets weak. However, he manages to throw a boat at Corbin, but it does not affect him. He tries to tell Corbin that Luthor is the enemy, but he doesn't listen. He directs the kryptonite's energy towards Superman and hits him to the ground. While on the ground, he rushes Superman with a handful of fists, like he stole his bacon. However, Superman manages to show him a vial containing the virus Corbin was infected with. It turns out Dr. Vale had put it in his food on Luthor's orders. Realizing he's been duped, Corbin tries to force Luthor to drink the contents in the vial. With those two occupied, Superman sets fire to the yacht by using his heat ray vision on spilled gasoline. The yacht explodes, throwing Luthor and Corbin into the water. Sadly, Corbin isn't able to float in water due to his metallic part, and ends up drowning. Luthor, on the other hand, gets chased by a shark, but before he gets turned into shark food, Superman saves him. He returns Luthor to LexCorp, and there, Luthor claims he won't be able to pin the incident on him due to a lack of evidence. Although Superman isn't worried about it, he reminds Luthor that he should be concerned about Corbin's return. Speaking of the devil, Corbin manages to find his way out of the water and walks back hell-bent on getting revenge on the bald fraud. Thank you for sticking to the end of my video. Please do me the biggest favor by leaving a like, comment, and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video.